work in a tech company. It is called How to Avoid a Bad User Onboarding. Before we move any forward, I'd like to give a small introduction about myself. I'm Juhi Amit. I joined Product People around 4 months back. Since I joined, I have worked for Zalando and Utopia Music. Prior to this, I was an entrepreneur for over 4 years. A little about what we do at Product People. So at Product People, our mission is to help companies discover and deliver great product faster. We do this by 2 ways. One, through this amazing community of people, which is now over 15,000. Thank you so much for being a part of our community. We share knowledge generously here, and other by doing the unglamorous hands-on work of product managers. We aim to onboard fast, align teams, and deliver excellent outcomes. So before we go any further, we would love to get to know you a bit, and we have a couple of icebreaker questions for you. For the people who have joined us from Zoom, you will be able to answer it right in the Zoom. And for the people who are joining us from other streaming services, please write your answers in the comment section, and we'll collect them from the comment section itself. So the first question is about what are the main goals of user onboarding? The options are demonstrate the product's core value, user activation, highlight the main features, user training, others. For this question, you can choose more than one options. And if you choose others, please write the reason in the comments so that we get your perception. The second question is, how would you describe your onboarding rate? The options are, it's great, it's good, but could be improved. It's below average and needs a lot of improvement. I don't know. This could be for your product, for something you have, for what you're working on. We'd love to know. I think for me, for the first one, I think most important is user activation and product's core value. And for the second one, I mean, we do great at onboarding. So, I mean, that's what we're known for. One of the things we're known for. But yeah, please feel free to take some time and come up with your answers. All right, so we have the answers to our poll. For the first question, 73% of our audience says option 1, that is demonstrate the product's core value. 82% of the people from our audience says user activation. 18% says highlight the main features, and 36% say user training. The second one, only 9% of our audience says that they think their onboarding is great. And only 36% says it's good, but can be improved. And then for below average, and I don't know, it's more than half, 50%. Thank you so much for participation. All right, so without any further ado, I'm honored to invite our guest for tonight, Pulkit Agrawal, who is co-founder and CEO of Chameleon. Pulkit, please feel free to share your screen.
Great. Yeah, very excited to be here with you all. Goal is to hopefully leave you at the end with some practical tips on how to improve your onboarding, or really how to avoid bad user onboarding, because that's honestly some of the norm is bad user onboarding. So hopefully you'll have some things to take away. I'm happy to take questions. So feel free to post them in the chat if you have anything about your product, or in the comments. We'll get back to them if you're live streaming. But yeah, we'd love to have any dialogue or discussion and any feedback or opinion. So I'm excited to chat. Then there'll be space for Q&A at the end. Quick intro to me. So co-founder and CEO of Chameleon. We help lots of companies build and improve their user onboarding experiences. And our mission really is to be the deepest product adoption platform for modern SaaS teams. We've seen a bunch of experiences. This is just every year we compile an annual report. And so this is kind of some of the data that we've used. And you can definitely learn more about Chameleon from our website. But I'll begin kind of where did my journey begin? And it did begin from bad user onboarding, funnily enough. I was learning how to use Asana, which is a product management tool. You're hopefully all familiar with it. And I found myself having 2 monitors, one where I was in the product itself, and then one where I was in the help center. And so what I found myself doing is switching back and forth. I would try to do something in Asana. I would then go search for how to do it better in the help center, read about it, maybe watch a video, then go back into the product, do it again, then go back to the help center. And I found this really big disconnect of, well, why am I having to go through all this effort and comparing the screenshots? And I just couldn't believe that other people were doing this to learn software. And so we started, my co-founder Brian and I started talking to some other product people, and we asked them, say, hey, what do you think about your user onboarding? And we consistently heard a few things. One was that it's not very good. Two is that we know it's important, we need to improve it. And three, we just don't have any time. So I don't know if you felt the same sentiment, but that's something I hear and see a lot. Is like people know they need to improve this, it's so important, but they just don't have time. And that's kind of where we came to Chameleon for, is like, how do we make it easy for teams to get better at this? And, it's really relevant and applicable now. There's, I don't know if anyone's familiar with always be fundraising or always be hiring. Well, here's my take on it, which is always be onboarding. And the reason is that we're in this end user era. And what that means is that people who are the users of software, business software, SaaS software, they are the decision makers and the buyers. Before, what might have happened is that the decision or the sale of software might have happened at the executive level. If you think back to the companies that bought Oracle, it's like the CIO, the CTO, or the IT department that's buying software. And that software buying process is like demos and discussions and golf courses and relationships. And it's very different to what it happens today, which is like, okay, there's the consumerization of software, the Dropbox model, where individual people are making decisions. They're like, oh, this is a cool tool, I can try it out for free or with my own credit card or company credit card, and I decide. So, end users are critical in making that decision. Users are also always evaluating. How many times have you heard a friend tell you about a new piece of software, or someone who's a coworker or a peer be like, hey, have you seen this thing out? And it's so easy for you to go check it out. So you're always evaluating. It's also because it's really easy to switch. You're paying often in many tools month to month, low cost. It's not a big hassle to change a contract. It's all cloud-based. You don't have to have like installation on premises, etc. So it's easier to switch than ever. And people really expect consumer grade user experiences. That when I use consumer apps, that's my standard for now business applications. And so I'm always assessing and evaluating things. One of the other big shifts that's happened is that revenue has become usage based. I recently saw a chart, I think it was a survey from OpenView Partners around the number of companies that are using a usage based model. That means usage-based model is when someone uses the software, that's when they're charged for it. Or if they use it more, that's when they're charged. That could be by seats. It could be by some other metric of usage. And this OpenView survey said that over 50% of companies will move to a usage-based model this year. And that's amazing. That's a big shift in how we work with software, because suddenly usage becomes paramount. If your users are not using the product, you're not getting paid. And that's very different to the old era where you're selling contracts, and that's very disconnected from usage. And the customer success and onboarding function is very different from the sales function. That's kind of converging. Sales and marketing and product is converging. And then, of course, all the growth. We talk about net revenue retention. The best SaaS companies have 120% plus net revenue retention. Just net revenue retention means the revenue that you're generating from your existing cohort of customers. So let's say you've got 100 customers. This year you make X dollars from them. Next year, from the same group of customers, you should be making 1.2x dollars. So you have to grow revenue from your existing base. Where does that come from? That comes from upsells, through new feature usage, through subscription. So, and then SaaS has exploded. There's tons of software. I think I saw another stat that I think on average companies use more than 100 SaaS applications, which is a lot of software to have to get your head around. But people are impatient. How long do you want to spend on figuring out software? Do you want to read documents before you start learning software, before you start trying stuff out? No way. You just want to get into it and start trying stuff out. And you want real-time help. You don't want to wait for calls. It's so annoying when someone's like, okay, let's get on a call. You're like, oh my God, can't you just solve this for me now? So there's lots to learn and figure out. So all of this is leading to this confluence that We have to continue onboarding people all the time. It's super critical. Activation is so important to drive success and revenue. And so that's setting the context. But what does good user onboarding look like? So this is an example I pulled from the internet. And this is often my experience with new software. Onboarding often looks like a welcome tool. It's like, welcome to the app. Before I can use the app, I have to read about the app. And before I can use it, I have to take this really long tour, which shows me every piece of the real estate, every navigation menu item. It's like really frustrating and boring. And we actually ran a survey and we asked how many people exit after the first step. And I'd be curious to see if anyone has a response to this. But I think from that, we learned that in that survey, over 90% of people are exiting on the first step, which is crazy. It's like so many product managers are building user onboarding that is missing the mark. And so we're in this place in the world where we have bad user onboarding. And it's not just one product, it's across the board. And why is that? And so what we want to talk a little bit about is how do we transform user onboarding to be really effective and not make it something that you hear groans from your users about. I'm like, oh my God, I have to take this really boring tour. And it actually meets their needs as well as your needs to be successful in the product. So how do we solve that? Well, what we should be doing is thinking about user onboarding as a conversion funnel. Now, hopefully this is not news to you. You're thinking about this anyway. Activation is a conversion funnel, just in the same way that you might be thinking about a sign-up flow on your marketing website. Okay, these are the stages. This is all the things that user has to do. You need to really, really apply that diligent science to user onboarding. So what are the specific steps that a user needs to take? Where is their drop-off? And how do we bridge those gaps through experiments? And what we don't want to do is we don't solve a whole funnel through a single experiment. No one does that. You actually break it down and solve each part of the puzzle through separate experiments. So first is to think about what are the steps of this funnel. So someone signs up for your product. What do they need to then go and read? What decisions do they need to make? What actions do they need to take? And what, to get to the aha moment. And that's the key end of the conversion funnel. And so what we want to do is, instead of thinking about it as giving someone a tour of the product, which is what we, inherently we're saying, well, we don't know what you're looking for. We think there's value in our product. And so we're going to just show you everything. Here's a full sampling of everything. And hopefully something in this hits and you find value in this somewhere. Instead of that, what we should need to do is break it down to, okay, what are the specific aha moments? Maybe for different personas or different user groups, there's different aha moments. The aha moment is really, really important. The aha moment is the moment of delight where somebody connects the dots. They understand, this is what this product is meant to do. And this is how it can solve my pain or my use case or my job that I'm here for. Getting them to the aha moment will give them a boost of dopamine, boost of motivation. And with that motivation, they will continue exploring, they will continue learning, they will continue investing. And so you need to get them to that aha moment. And you have a small bucket of time to get them to this aha moment. That bucket is the energy they have to spend learning. It's the cognitive load they have. Now, if they expend that cognitive load, that energy, because they are spending time making decisions or reading or learning stuff that isn't useful, then they will bounce. But if before they expend that energy, they get to the aha moment, they will recoup some energy, they will refill their bucket, and they'll keep going. Now, there's a behavioral scientist at Stanford called BJ Fogg who talks a lot about this. And he has this model, the Fogg behavior model. So let me just talk about this because it's very relevant in thinking about how to drive improvements in the conversion funnel. So here on the y-axis, we have motivation. So when there's low motivation or high motivation. And then on the x-axis, we have ability. Is something easy to do on the right or hard to do? And then in this chart, we have an action line. And what this shows is that everything above this action line is when people act. Everything below this action line is when people don't act. And when you are above this action line, you give somebody a prompt that leads to a successful behavior or successful action. Below this action line, if you give somebody a prompt, it doesn't lead to a successful action. So all three of these things, which is motivation, ability, and prompts, are important components to driving actions. So let me talk about this a little bit more. That means that when you have low motivation, it doesn't matter if you improve the ability of the user, make a seamless interface, make it super easy, they're going to fail. And so you need to ramp up motivation. And when motivation is high, even if something is harder to do, they might still succeed. So it's not always just about ability. It's not always just about showing people how to do something. It's also about making sure that they have motivation. And that comes from explaining the value proposition, showing social proof and examples of how they can succeed. So think about it as, so to recap, think about your user onboarding as a conversion funnel. Think about the specific little stages that you have in this, and then think about what is preventing people succeeding. What's the friction that's preventing them succeeding, and how do you get them to succeed and take actions? Can you improve their ability to do something? You can point something out or give them some coaching, or can you improve their motivation? Show them the reward at the end of the rainbow, or show them what other people are getting and they're missing out on, leverage that. So here are some specific ways that you can avoid bad user onboarding. Avoid very long welcome tours, especially those that block someone's user experience. So if I go into a product and before I'm even able to orient myself or understand where things are or what's possible, and before I'm able to play and explore and discover and have all of those fun things happen, if you hit me with a welcome tour that blocks everything, it's almost like putting a gate before the fun, before the value, before the discovery. Those are treated badly. People don't want gates, they want access. So if you're going to have a welcome tour, make sure it's out of the way, it's opt-in, it's something that's compelling, that somebody actually wants to take rather than forcing them to take it. So avoid anything long. Our research, and we do a benchmarks report every year, we've seen that anything longer than 3 steps leads to significant drop-off. So you have to keep any in-product prompt really short. Don't just focus on how, but also why. We talked a little bit about this already with the motivation. Often what happens is we're so used to teaching people how to do something that as soon as they come into the product, it's all about how you do that, how you do this. But really, as people get into it, as it's become easier to get into the product, over time, our marketing pages have calls to action, which is try now. It's not just request demo or, talk to sales, it's try now. So people very quickly click try now. They're in your product before they've even understood what all it does, what the value proposition is. And so think about that as their context. They're in the product with less knowledge than they might have been before, and you don't have control of what they've learned or haven't learned. So if you only focus on how you do something, you're missing a real point, which is to help re-educate on why. What all of the great material on your marketing site is all about why. It's all about value proposition. It's all about benefit. So we have to bring some of that into the user onboarding to remind people why they're there, what the value is, what the reward is, and improve their motivation. Make sure you set this clear goal. When you're thinking about user onboarding, write down what is the aha moment, and maybe it's by persona, but write down this is the aha moment when they do this, and then calculate the shortest path to get there. Okay, they need to read this thing, they need to click this, they need to type this in, they need to invite somebody else, they need to wait for somebody else to get their email, so write every step along the way, and then use that as your conversion funnel. Think about where is their drop off, then narrow in to that gap first. Like, oh, wow, people are not inviting other people, and we need that to happen. Okay, great. So then why are they not inviting other people? Either they don't know how because they don't have the ability, or they don't have the motivation. They don't know why they should do that, or you're not prompting them to do it. So that's why they're not even acting. So think about what's preventing someone succeeding at that moment or in that part of the path, then solve that specifically. You can solve that with better copy, with cleaner user experiences, with prompts. That could be an email prompt, it could be in product prompt, it could be a tooltip, a help article, a video. There's so many ways to solve it, but you've got to first know what you're solving rather than just throwing a welcome tour against the wall. Give people self-serve options. This is if you're doing something either in the product, like you are giving that welcome tour, or you're encouraging them to take an action, let them snooze it, let them start it later, let them find help when they need it. Often what we find is people get into a product, they start exploring a little bit, and then after they've explored, they've exhausted some of that energy they have, then they're like, okay, now what? Or where do I go now? Or I need some help. And so that's something where they should be very clearly signposted where, hey, learn more about this feature, or, take this tour, or read this article, or watch this video. You should be very clear in the interface how to get help easily and how to learn more easily. And then consider variations for different personas. Often, again, what we're doing is we're treating everyone the same. And there's a really great case study from Superhuman, which is an email client, and the founder there, Rahul Vora. When in the early days of Superhuman, they had mixed engagement, and they were scratching their heads. They were like, well, what's going on here? Is our product really not at product market fit? Do we need to change our feature set? Should we target? Who should we target? And so they ran an in-product micro survey, and they asked people, it's a very simple product market fit question. That's something that Sean Ellis popularized, which is, how disappointed would you be if this product no longer existed? And then they gave people the standard options, very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, not disappointed at all. And they found that the Sean Ellis methodology is at least 40% of people need to be very disappointed for you to establish product market fit, or for you to signify that you have product market fit. And what they found is that they had very different responses based on persona. So they were also collecting the role of the user. And they found that when the user was a founder or a chief executive officer or someone in the executive team, they had really strong product market fit. But when the role wasn't that, they didn't have strong product market fit. And so then that showed them to focus on a particular persona, particular group of people. That's who then they did use research with, etc. So, you might want to think about, like, if you're feeling like, oh, we're not quite sure if we've got it, run an in-product micro survey to help that. And in-product micro surveys can be really effective. We can talk more about that as well if you wanted. And then most importantly, I think probably having somebody who's owning this user onboarding, owning improving activation, owning improving adoption. When somebody or a team is dedicated to that, they will naturally, find more ways to drive success. So if you can own it, if you want to own it, if you want to make a case for owning it, I think it's one of the most valuable product things you can do. And it's also a fantastic skill set to develop, because we're all moving into this product-led growth era. And so if you're able to spend time and get your company to invest in you spending time in this, it's a fantastic skill set to have. So having somebody dedicated to driving growth is going to be a really great way to avoid bad user onboarding. Okay, so I'm going to kind of wrap up. We have a lot of content about all of this stuff. I gave a broad overview of some of this. We have a user onboarding handbook. We have best practices, guide to onboarding flows and examples, and also a demo. So there's, for example, some questions that you can ask. There's like a little self survey you can take to assess your onboarding in our handbook. So there's a lot of materials out there for you to learn from. And if you're interested, explore more deeply. Trust me, I really encourage you to invest time in improving activation. It will yield long-term results for your success, your retention, and your growth. So anyway, I think there's great resources available, but we can maybe move to a Q&A. If you have questions now, happy to take them.
Thank you very much. Can you stop sharing your screen so that I can share my screen?
Of course.
Thank you. Okay, that was really great, Pulkit. I mean, I took a lot of notes. Thank you for that. All right, so now we're on to the Q&A session. So for the people who are on the Zoom, you can directly raise your hand and ask the question on Zoom itself, or you can post it on our chat. For the people who are joining us from other platforms, you feel free to post your questions in the comment section. We'll collect from there and ask it on your behalf. And I'll give you some time to draft your questions. And while you're doing that, let's talk a little bit more about where can you use our services. Okay, Dave, just a couple of minutes. Let's wait till everybody drafts their questions, and then we'll move ahead with the questions. Meanwhile, let me tell you when you can use Product People. So we can, to cover any kind of temporary product management, any kind of product management need. For example, if you have somebody who's on parental cover, somebody who left and you're looking for someone, we are always there to offer an interim service, which is more than 3 months. We also help and work as product coach or consultant, and we can help you if, arrange discovery sessions for your next big product. This is the snippet of some of the positive feedback that we've received from our clients. This is the list of our B2B clients that we're very proud to have. It's Utopia, World Health Organization, Sestrify, Cognigy, and many happy customers. This is the list of some of our B2C clients. It includes Zalando, Tier, WeShare, Omio, Blinkist, and many more. This is our team, our wonderful and diverse team that is spread across the globe. And if you can see, there's a small part left in the end, which can be used. So if you're interested, we are hiring across all the levels for product managers. All right. Thank you so much. And now we can move ahead with the question answers. I thought we had one hand raised already. Was it Dave? Can you please unmute yourself and ask the question?
Yeah, hi there. So I'm on a very bad connection, so hopefully this goes okay. So yeah, my name is Dave Ruzier, product manager in HR tech. A question, like a very sort of interesting case we have at the moment, is we sort of separate our onboarding experience in sort of two phases. One is we're trying to convince the user to register for our service, and then of course to engage. What we have found so far, that those experiences, they are very tightly connected. So the experience we offered, sort of introducing our product and trying to convince them to register, immediately affects like how active the user will be within we give them ahead of time. The more optionality we give, the worse the conversion is to actually have these people register. But the better the activation or the engagement in is.
Okay, I guess no. I'm so sorry, but I guess I think there's a lot of lag.
My question is like, how to balance these two experiences?
Yeah. Okay. So Dave, I got the question. It's very laggy, but it's okay. So let me summarize it for everyone. Maybe you can mute Dave, Juhi.
Yeah.
Okay, so losing people on the. Yeah. So. Yeah, I'm not sure how much you got from the question.
Okay, so here's what I understand of the question. You've got a flow and two parts to the flow. If you get a lot of friction in the first part, it improves the activation and conversion on the second part. And the question is, how do you balance more friction for better, higher quality conversion with lower friction for more volume of conversion? Is that right? Can you maybe give me a thumbs up or in the chat?
Yeah, exactly that. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, good question. It's always a general theme of how do you balance good friction and how much friction. So what I would recommend for you is first, there's two frameworks I would think about. I always think about start from the end and work backwards in terms of conversion funnels. So when someone is always, if we think about pirate metrics, so we've got, acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, referral. So those are kind of it's almost like life cycle stages of metrics we care about. I'd start towards the end. I'll get to your question specifically. It's a long way around, but I'll start at the end always. So, if you've got people who are ready to buy, get them to buy. And then once that's working well, if you've got people who are in the product but not ready to buy, get them ready to buy. And then if you've got people not in the product but are interested, get them into. So work backwards. Therefore, first focus on making sure that the people that are getting in are succeeding well. Once you've got good conversion, then you should open up and reduce friction to make increase the volume. So now let's say you've tried that. You've got your people coming in. As soon as you open up the friction gates, you've got poor quality of conversion. If that's happening, then what you need to do is change the friction that you're applying in the beginning. So, good friction can take many forms. Maybe what you're not, instead of removing questions to reduce the friction, maybe you change the question so that it reduces friction for the high quality people, but really still helps you, come in through volume. So I think the summary is, keep quality high. Don't sacrifice quality for volume, but as you look to expand quality, as you look to expand volume, try playing with different kinds of friction in the first phase to improve that. I don't know. You can message me in the chat to see how that landed. I'm happy to do a follow-up. I know that was very general and very theoretical, but hard to get into the specifics without looking at the product, or any of the specific friction points. Okay, back to you.
Okay, thank you. Right, next we have Andre.
Yeah, guys. Hey there. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yep.
Awesome. So I basically have one short question. And the funny thing is, Dave, I'm also in HR tech. We're developing a startup for pre-qualification of students and going ahead, planning to do ATS and all different types of onboarding for companies and to hire the best talent possible. So currently we're doing, since we have to validate the right students on our platform, we have to ask them a bunch of questions, which obviously takes them through a longer registration process. So my question is here, our goal is to get registered users and qualified users to the platform. So we would either do a simple and let's say inefficient, sort of quick registration process versus a more comprehensive one and visual with all the graphics, just like how you've explained. So if you would have your past working experience, your education, all on one screen, and there will be a visual of a person talking to a recruiter and some nice visual next to it, explaining eventually how or why you should go through this step. I'm particularly curious of what do you think in this case? How do I which of these two options would work better in your opinion? If you could give opinion to that, and how do you think can I measure the onboarding of the users, how efficient it is, and what do they think about the onboarding?
Okay, let me try and summarize the question. Which is not super easy, but okay. So it sounds like your question, you have a long onboarding or kind of sign up registration flow. The question is it better to have everything showing up at once for a user to look at, or maybe something that's more visual for them to understand, and the comparison between those two options? Is that right?
So the question is basically, should I motivate the user to go each step, like filling out their information about their past working experience and their previous education or some of their skills, and basically motivate them to do so by adding visuals to these steps? Or should I simply just put it out there and say, if you want to register, you have to fill this out?
Okay. All right. So I think this is relevant in a broad sense for a lot of people because it's a lot about conversion across input fields, which you'll see everywhere. There's input fields and sign up flows everywhere, registration flows, and even Dave's question was somewhat related to this. So a couple of high level principles, and then I'll give you my opinion on your specific question. One is, like, I'm sure everyone's familiar with Typeform, right? Or hopefully you are. It's a surveying tool. One of the things that made Typeform stand out from SurveyMonkey, from Google Forms, was this natural inbuilt progressive disclosure, where you fill out one question, that's your focus, then you hit enter, and then you move to the next one. It's also one of the other great things, which is all keyboard enabled. Like, I don't have to click, it's all tabbed and easy. So there is generally a benefit to progressive disclosure where you're not showing everything up front, because it's very overwhelming. And then at that point, I'm like, oh my God, I can't digest all of this information. I'm going to just come back to it. As soon as somebody thinks I'm coming back to something, you've lost some people anyway. So progressive disclosure does help. The other thing you should think about is, what is the stuff that I really need to deliver value? Now, if you look at an example of people requiring passwords for signing up for products. Like hopefully people have seen that change in the last 3 years, where previously it was like, okay, enter your password to create a password for this account you're signing up. And now it's like, you don't have to create a password. In fact, you get a confirmation link in your email later after you've been accessing the product to then go create a password and create an account or save your account. So that's a example of bringing value quicker and reducing friction and putting it to the end. So as anyone's thinking about form fields and friction around sign up flows, think about what is every piece that you're asking for, is it being used in the next moment? If you ask for somebody's, I don't know, someone's partner's aunt's birthday, are you going to use that information next? Probably not. If you're going to ask somebody for, I don't know what you're asking, but if you're not going to use that information, don't ask it to them at that point, because you're asking them to do upfront work for no value or reward. So push that out and maybe use it as a follow-up form. Maybe in your product, you can ask multiple questions. One of the things we promote or encourage is micro-survey, single question in product. And you can have a sequence of these single questions over time as people are playing with the product and you collect information from them. So some general thoughts on kind of forms and surveys. Specifically about your question, Andre, it sounds to me that visual will be helpful, but really there's no way for me to predict the right answer. You have to A/B test it. Often A/B tests are counterintuitive. You're like, of course this one will win. And you're like, what? It made no difference. And so it's really hard to know. It sounds like, if you apply the general principles of what is going to reduce someone feeling overwhelmed, make the question in a way that they understand why they have to fill this in. If you flip it and say, this is going to be valuable to you because we're going to customize the product for these choices. If you think about Twitter or Netflix or any of these, the onboarding of these products, they ask you like, hey, what are your favorite topics, or what are your favorite types of movies or genres, etc. And they explain why they're asking you that question. It's so they can customize the product for you. So then you're like, okay, fine, I do want a customized product. I want personalized product. Let me do this work. But if so hopefully some of those will give you some tips on improving that. It sounds like visuals will be better rather than everything at once. Progressive disclosure should be better, but best way is to test it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you so much for your answer, and your presentation was flawless as well. I have been analyzing a bunch of tools, and just as you have mentioned, disclosing is a single screen per time seems to becoming the industry standard. If you take a look at Fiverr, LinkedIn, all of these platforms are asking like 1 or 2 questions per screen, and then you move over to the next one. So great, thank you for answering my question.
Yeah, pleasure. Good question. And thanks also, Dave, for the follow-up. I'm sorry your management cares about vanity metrics, but I'm glad that you're asking them about, hey, what kind of user do you want? Okay, you've acquired users, but do you want retention? Do you want great users? Do you want users that pay money? Try to link it to revenue. Management in the end cares about revenue. And we as product people, as we grow in our careers, we need to get better at linking product to revenue. The more we can link product to revenue, the more successful we'll be. So if you can say, hey, these people are driving this much revenue, if we make this change, our revenue will change in this way, people are going to pay a lot of attention to you. And so try to translate the conversation away from MTUs, DAUs, WAUs, anything like that, to revenue and what impacts revenue.
Well, that was great, actually. Thank you. We have a question from Joe, which I think is very interesting. They want to know, would there be a voice onboarding in near future?
Sure, why not? That sounds great. It depends whose voice maybe. But voice onboarding. Okay, so thoughts on voice and video generally. Sometimes you get to these websites and they also play video with sound and you're like, what are you doing? Like you're desperately trying to find the close button because you're like in this co-working space and it's like playing this video. So I think there's some challenges to auto voice. I know in some cases you get like a little like notification ding, like that's something some tools do. It's like they give you a little ding when there's like something to look at. Some chat tools do this. I think generally we are moving to more asynchronous. So voice is becoming a platform where, you're getting voice notes. I use Slack. I use voice notes in Slack. I use voice notes in WhatsApp. I find them really helpful, but they're really most helpful for me as a producer because I can quickly, very easily record my voice. It's not as effective for somebody as a consumer because they have to opt in to listening to this voice note without really knowing what's going to be in it. Whereas if I type something out for a user, they can scan, very, very quickly, much more quickly than listening to a voice note. And so I think there's a balance there. You know, what things need voice explanations, what things need video, and can you convince somebody to listen to your voice or video versus it being easy to scan. Remember, people are becoming more impatient. So yeah, interesting thought experiment. We'll see what happens.
Okay.
I don't think Chameleon is planning on offering voice functionality in the near future, but who knows?
Yeah, who knows? But it could be interesting. Thank you. All right, next question. All right, so how do you optimize onboarding for complex native software, which are specially for professionals who very well know what they want and they're looking for efficiency and saving time? For example, Photoshop.
Yeah, very good question. So firstly, everyone thinks their users are special. And so every company I speak to is like, well, our users are not like every other user. They have their unique needs. They have this. They are more tech savvy. They're not tech savvy. Our product is extra complicated. So, if you're thinking that, you're welcome to the club of every other product. Everyone thinks that their product is complicated in a way and is confusing in a way. So I think some of the same principles apply. I think, for a complex product like Photoshop, firstly, you have many personas. You have the sophisticated user, you have the tire kicker, you have somebody who's basic. So I think knowing who you're optimizing for, it sounds like you might already know that you have very sophisticated users. And for those sophisticated users, maybe they have a different learning technique. Maybe they want to self-learn a lot more. Maybe they want to watch videos or tutorials. Maybe they want to go to classes. So you have to orient your teaching around that, but you want to make sure you signpost that in the product. So let's say you have this fantastic course, you have an LMS and you've got this video course with quizzes and answers and all this kind of stuff to learn product. But when they're in the side of the product, make sure you signpost that. Maybe there's a slide out that says, hey, take our course to learn how to use this feature. And that takes you off product and they go into the LMS. One of the customers that we had a lot of, before they were starting using Chameleon, they had this getting started webinar where they went through some tips and tricks on how to effectively set up. The product was for travel agents, and they were helping travel agents create itineraries for their customers. And so they knew that people who joined these webinars were successful, but so they just weren't joining and they weren't sure how. And all it was that they weren't prompting it. They weren't promoting it in the product. So then when they, in certain pages on the product, they started promoting that, hey, learn the best tips and tricks on our Getting Started webinar. And they ran these every week. And their attendance rates went through the roof. I think it was like 50x attendance or something in these webinars. And then it was amazing to get the amount of value that those users found. So, you may have a different format of teaching, or your audience might prefer to learn a different way, but make sure you're signposting it in the right place in the product.
Okay, I have a question. Is it okay or doable if you give the user an option? For example, for someone like me, I prefer having to read a lot more than listening, because that's how I prefer it. Do you think it's okay if we can give options to the user of what kind of onboarding experience do they want?
You can give people options. I think, remember, every time you give someone an option, they have to make a decision. Every time they have to make a decision, they have to expend energy. And to make the right decision, they need to know the pros and cons of each choice. And so, communicating all of that can be draining, and it can be counter-effective for the user, because it's just like more work for the user. So if you can make that choice easy for the user, or if you think about what are the most important choices to make for the user to make versus for you to make, then that's better. So if most people are going to prefer one way, and that's fine, just give them that way. Or if you know that really these two options are so different and you have no way of figuring out which one someone would prefer, then you can maybe give them the option. But be careful, too many options leads to churn, leads to drop off, leads to bounce.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question that was a DM to me, which was, where can we get hands-on resources? So I will try and put a few of those in the chat now, so people can get those hands on those resources. Sorry, just to explain that.
And we will also post that on the streaming services, from all the streaming services that we're streaming as of now. So people who are joining us from other places can access it from their chat box. All right, next question. At what maturity stage of product does the implementation of an integrated onboarding makes sense?
Good question. Excellent question. I see some customers go too early into scaled onboarding. Scaled onboarding is like, for example, using Chameleon for in-product experiences or in-product guidance. Really, if you're pre-launch, if you're in a beta for a product, if you have 100 monthly active users or something, you're all too early for these scaled onboarding products and systems. What you should be doing is very concierge onboarding, have people handhold and help, because really what you're in a discovery phase. And to build good onboarding, you need to know your user, you need to know where they're going to have friction, you need to know what questions they have really well. So what you shouldn't do is over optimize on giving them guidance and training and teaching, and under optimize on discovery and learning. So in those cases, you might want to, if you're going to do anything scaled, likely micro surveys or in-product surveys to learn more. But I would recommend, go and speak to them, handhold them, watch them to do these things. I think once you're at the phase where you're not able to do that manually with people, that's when you have to invest in scaling systems. Now, typically for SaaS companies, we're looking at, 500 to 1,000 monthly active users. That's the real bottom end of anything that you're scaling. And then of course it goes up to the millions. You can also think about, who on your team has capacity for this. Again, early stage companies, you don't have someone dedicated. So it's like a single PM that's trying to do everything, or a single product marketer or growth manager or something. So naturally in those cases, you're going to have less iteration. So I think, be smart. Don't overly spend time on scaled systems if you don't need them. I don't know, hopefully that gives you a sense, but again, if there's any follow-ups, happy to try and take a better crack at it.
Again, I have a follow-up. So you even mentioned the in-product survey in your presentation. Can you give a little bit more detail about it?
Yes. So the typical surveys that we are used to are ones where people end up sending you an email with this like long online survey that you have to take, and really people don't complete that. Your email click-through rates are like 1, 2, 3%. Drop off on those surveys means completion rates are 30, 40, 50%. So you've really got a really small group of people completing surveys. So what's a new trend now is micro surveys, which are one question or very short surveys. Now you can also do these in product, so they can look and feel native. And it can mean that you can get very quick feedback in the relevant place in the product. So when somebody is using your analytics dashboard, you can ask them, hey, how easy was this dashboard to use? And then you can build up a baseline of like, oh, hey, on average, people think this is like 3 out of 5 E's. And then, hey, I'm going to make an improvement. Let me compare what the baseline is. Or you can ask them, hey, what brought you here today? And you can connect, get their free-form text input. You can send that to your Slack channel, and then you can start to learn that way. So the idea behind micro surveys is making it more integrated into your product experience, bringing continuous discovery, continuous learning, in the same way we have continuous shipping, continuous deployment, all of those pieces about sharing and giving, we should also be collecting and learning in the same way. So it's a way to scale collecting feedback. And it's something we found a lot of our customers have found value in. I'll send you a link to learning more. That we also have a lot of blog content about running these effectively, different templates and examples. So if you're not doing this, I think it's a quick win. It's a really quick win. Like you can start to learn from your users early on, and you'll find value in that, regardless of which stage you're at, what your user group is, etc., etc.
Yeah, I agree. Even I answer such interact surveys, but yeah, emails, they're just pass by unless it's your favorite product.
Yeah, and also like, when you answer that kind of survey, again, it's the same point around explaining in a question why that's being asked. You can connect the dots, like, oh, I'm answering a question about the analytics dashboard. A, I have context and relevance. B, I'm like, oh, maybe this will improve my analytics dashboard in the future. So you're much more motivated to actually answer that, because it's a closed loop or a quicker loop of like, okay, hey, this is where this is going to benefit me again in the future.
Yeah, that's right, actually. All right, I guess the next question is something very close to it. It's about how do you increase motivation for different user personas while you're onboarding?
Yeah, the best way to increase motivation is to know what motivates those personas. So you have to ask, or you have to sense or figure out what is the job that they're trying to accomplish, what's the pain they have today, what makes their current solution ineffective, what are they yearning for. So it starts with discovery, it starts with learning and discovery. And when you're able to do that, then you're able to then supplement that motivation. So let's say you learn from some users, hey, I don't know what, maybe you're a video editing platform and people are coming to you because they're like, oh, YouTube video editing doesn't let me put frames easily. And when you learn that, then to all of your other users, you can prove that as a prompt, like, hey, learn how to add frames quickly. And so what you're doing is learning from people and sharing that to other people. If you feel like the other way is that, well, people know what it is and want to boost the motivation of the people that are coming in, well, think about what demotivates people. It's like, okay, what demotivates me is I have to put a lot of effort in and then I don't get return. It's all about ROI. Okay, so how can I be motivated? Well, if I think I'm going to get a higher return and it's going to be a lower investment. And so, obviously you have to be honest about it, but if you can indicate to people how quickly they can get a return on their investment, that will motivate people. And think about the returns that people care about. They want to save money, they want to make money, they want to save time. I think those are, essentially the three things that motivate people.
Okay, right. I still have one question. So we talked about aha moments, right? So I know that, so there are two ways. Once when we start, we don't have enough data. So what would be the aha moment? How do you best estimate that this is what the user might want? And then how do you use the data that you collect over time while people are using your platform and, forecast those aha moments with a lot more probability to succeed or?
Got it. So the question is, if you don't have enough data, how do you figure out the aha moment? Is that the right is that the question?
Yeah. And even if once you have the data, how do you use that data well enough to be very sure about, okay, this is the aha moment?
Yeah. Okay. So the aha moment, and this is a good question because let's make it a distinction. Sometimes people have heard like the Facebook, what is it? 5 friends in 7 days. That was the magic number that drove a lot of activation and retention. And so there's a lot of chatter about magic number, right? But the magic number or the activation is different to the aha moment. See, no one really gets an aha moment when they've got 5 friends in 7 days. People get aha moment when they get photos from their friends or when they discover somebody on Facebook that they were not connected with. So that shows that is the aha moment, but there's a different metric, which is the magic number that correlates or causes retention. So firstly, let's be really clear. What is the aha moment from the perspective of the user? So how do you discover the aha moment? Well, really, you have some clues to it based on the value proposition on your marketing website. You're already talking about some value that you're promoting. So how do you get that value to your user in the product? That's going to be aha. If they get that value, that's a major aha moment. Now, before that, what could be the aha moment? Maybe there's like that value they get is down the road. They have to implement and onboard and activate and input data, and that's way down the road. So maybe there's a smaller aha moment in the beginning. The way to discover that is to do some user research and like figure out like, hey, what was cool about this product? Or what was cool in your first experience? And look for the emotion. Look for the things that people get excited about, where their eyes light up. I'll give you one example. For us, it's a really small feature, which is that you can add a highlight on any element on your page. So you could say, okay, I want to highlight this text box. And it's a feature we've had around for a long time. But whenever someone first does that and they're able to point and click to an element and then everything else becomes a shroud and they're like, wow, that's pretty cool. I can make a change in my product. And that's a moment of delight and empowerment. And that's the aha moment. So look for those moments, ask people. You can do session replays, but really you should talk to people or do micro surveys and to try and figure out what moments they were delighted. Once you know what those moments of delight are, you want to get people to those moments of delight quickly. So what is preventing people getting to that moment of delight? What's the friction in the way? What are the things that they trip up on? And then you want to try and reduce or remove those barriers to get more people to that moment of delight and aha. If you do that, you'll get better conversion. Hopefully that answers the question.
It does. Thank you. All right. I guess we are past the time for questions. Well, thank you one more time, Pulkit, for joining us today. This was a very insightful and fruitful session. I absolutely loved it. Thank you, everyone, for joining today and participating. We do this every week, so if you had fun today, please join us next Tuesday as well. If you can reach out to us on our Product People team page. You can also chat with us on Telegram, and you can support us on Patreon. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
And then can I make glad to be here. We're also doing another webinar. We're doing a webinar, US research. There's a lot of questions here about research and UX. If you're interested, you can join that, but really glad to be here with you. Thank you for hosting. It's a fantastic community, great engagement. So yeah, it was really fun. Thank you.
Well, I'm really